Yes, thanks for everything. That was an awesome panel. Do you see a stigma around investing in mental and behavioral health from an investment standpoint because there isn't the same return as other parts in healthcare?
It's for you.
Well, and for you. I mean, like Blue Cross Blue Shield. I mean, big time. So I will say, I've been in VC for 5 years. I don't have a 20-year view on your question. And I think that's really important to the question of stigma, okay? I believe that the times are changing, in particular in the self-insured employer market for some of the premium kind of equivalent of Cadillac plan. I will include in them the Googles, Facebooks, Amazons of the world who have tremendous amount of anxiety and lack of productivity in their workforce. I think that is a crisis. I think that they are realizing it's a crisis, and I think that that's a different segment than someone who had a hip replacement, ended up on opioids, and now is on fentanyl. Okay, so I still think that there is a way to make this work. I think that we are watching companies like, you know, Ginger.io, we are watching Quartet, we are watching Lantern, we are watching all of these companies to see how they scale. And if they can get out of this self-insured employer one-by-one sales cycle into the blues, and at what rate will they get reimbursed? And I think that that as a country is incredibly important. And similarly for managed Medicaid versus national coverage for Medicare, really different conversation on how and where that gets done. I think there's a lot in shared risk agreements to see how this could work, and a lot in self-insured employers who have other drivers that are trying to make it worthwhile. So I think it works, but I'm just gonna come back to Robert's comment about getting in the weeds, like getting in the weeds of like which organization, how they get paid, why are they aligned, what's the real metric. The real metric is productivity. You gotta measure days in the office. I mean, like that has nothing to do with a clinical trial. So it's just really different about every single buyer, what you're trying to solve for, but I think that there's a way. I really do. That's me. Anyone else?
I mean, based on level of activity, I don't see any stigma really around it. To be a mercenary about it, having been an investor for 20 years, I hate to say it, but like investors go where the money is. And if they perceive return, you know, if they perceive their returns to be had in a sector, they'll go there. You know, I mean, as I say, you know, fundraising from the venture perspective is our way of being humble. Like every few years they make us go back to our investors to make us humble and have to go grovel for money just like entrepreneurs do. And I always say, like, our investors don't really invest in strategies, they invest in future returns. Because at the end of the day, you know, they really won't care how you got there if you get there. And so that's sort of the pure mercenary approach to it. I think independent of that, no, I happen to think that what's happened over the last 5 years in this, and I do have a 20-year view of it, is that people have finally awakened to the magnitude of the problem. Is that they didn't realize how insidious it was and pervasive, and that it isn't just about opioids and addiction. It's about, you know, chronic pain. It's about lost productivity. It's about paralyzing anxiety and depression, let alone more, you know, serious schizophrenia, bipolar, some of these really sort of incredibly debilitating things. But I think people are recognizing, and it's probably been most acute in the self-insured and ACO markets where the people have risk. And now suddenly they look at the claim, they're like, holy cow, this is a sleeping giant. And it's, sadly, I think it's probably 50% underreported. Like, I think there are people out there who actually are still afraid of the assessment side because they're afraid if they actually assess it. We have an investment in business that does a lot of work with health in schools, and they're terrified that if they start doing assessments around kids in schools, they're going to sort of uncover all this illness and have no way to treat it.
Primary care doctors don't like to screen for depression because of the fragmented, chaotic cottage industry that is the mental health field. The worst thing you could do to a primary care doctor is have them identify a problem and then in the remaining 38 seconds not be able to create a disposition plan.
Exactly.
So when you could say to them, hey guys, we're going to pay $15 for screening in the PHQ-9, they're like, that's hilarious. Like, we're not going to do that because we don't have a meaningful vehicle, which is why a solution like telehealth has more traction. I'll just give you 30 seconds on that. 4 years ago, there was zero coverage for any psychotherapy, any psychiatric coverage at Blue Cross of Massachusetts. Over 4 years, and it's been incremental. Basically, everything under the sun is covered now. So how did that happen? Well, internal advocacy and also tolerance from the self-insured market and the fully insured market, and increasing acceptance that this has to be a way to deal with, for instance, the problem for the primary care doctor. Now, it's not widely used yet. It's interesting. These things are complicated. So now technology has come, which solves the problem. The practitioners weren't trained on it. The veterans with gray hair aren't sure this is real treatment. The consumer is open to it, especially if it doesn't involve parking, driving, and you can do it after you put the kids to bed. But nobody's materially marketing it to them. So, these are complex equations, but I guess I would say on the investment side, I think there is a long path here, but I think it's going to be a growth path.